Hello there and welcome. I'm Mike Davis. Thanks so much for joining us here on Sound Off Sports. I'm joined right now by my producer, James Edward Barrickman the fourth. James, great to see you.
Glad to be here.
Entering week 10 of the NFL, a lot of
Flying
stuff.
by. It sucks.
Flying by, but so many storylines, of course. There's the start of some coaches being fired. We're going to be touching on that. We got a lot of injuries to deal with, of course. A lot of 2-7 teams. There's nine
Yep.
2-7 teams. So I guess you can say there is a
Tankathon is on.
Is it Tankathon?
There's a
Tankathon
website
for
called
who?
Tankathon. Tank for Shador.
That's your guy.
Yeah, Tank for Shador. And we'll talk about that, last block of the show?
Block, yeah. We're going to be getting into that. But let's first kick this off with America's team, okay? America's team, the Cowboys. Dak Prescott, their franchise quarterback, is out multiple weeks. Craziness ensued in that last game, a laceration on his hand. Now he's dealing with another issue with an injury to his hamstring potentially. So a lot going on. We asked you all at home, can Dak and the Cowboys survive without Dak? In fact, so let's see what people at home are saying. Let's get a response right off the bat, James.
This first one is from Bear Cornelius on Facebook.
Great
He says,
name.
Dak stinks. Should have been dumped years ago. All caps, Mike. All caps.
Wow. Bear Cornelius, amazing name.
Not a Dak fan.
I want to steal that name from you, Bear. So
Why
congratulations.
does that remind me of Christmas?
It's a lovely name.
Yeah.
Cornelius, Christmas.
Cornelius, there's a Christmas movie with a Cornelius,
there?
I swear. Yeah.
Bear Grylls. It's a great name.
Right.
But listen, congratulations just on the name. But yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of people think Dak stinks. He got that huge contract, right? The largest contract ever given to a quarterback. So the Cowboys are kind of tied to this guy. But everything that's going down in Dallas, Arlington right now is not a pretty sight. They're not surviving with Dak. So why would they survive without Dak is the way that I would look at it. I mean, yes, it could be the most Cowboys thing ever for Cooper Rush to come in and for the team to suddenly start moving in the right direction. But if you were diagnosing the problem in Dallas, what's your diagnosis?
The things that the Cowboys used to be good at, they're no longer good at. They can't run the football. They're 31st, I think, in rush yards per game. And the defense, which is really supposed to be the strength of this team, is the weakness. They're one of the worst defenses in the league. I have the stat here. 6th most yards allowed per game and 2nd most points per game allowed. What the heck happened? We came into this season thinking that this is supposed to be one of the better groups, in the league, and it just hasn't been that way at all.
Two things happened. One, Dan Quinn, who was running the defense, the defensive coordinator, left town. He's now the head coach of the Commanders. So that's number one.
Right.
Mike Zimmer came in, who knows defense, but it takes some time to adjust to a new system.
Yeah.
And number two, Micah Parsons, their best player,
He's been hurt off and on.
has been hurt.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are problematic in that scenario. The problem is, though, they can't run the ball. It doesn't seem like the offensive line is functioning
Dak's
like they used to.
one of the top 10 most sacked quarterbacks in the league.
Right.
They can't
So
protect Dak.
it just-
They can't run the football.
So you can't do a lot of things right. And
Right.
I think a lot of people think, well, it's just about Dak getting the ball to CeeDee Lamb. But that's not how you really win games in the NFL. And then you start adding injury issues on top of it, and it becomes a very problematic situation.
It's, like when Dak is – the question here is, can the Cowboys survive without Dak? Well, they're 3-5 with Dak. So, and Dak was their only source of offense. So is Cooper Rush going to come in and somehow make the defense better, somehow going to make the protection better, somehow going to make them run the football better? No.
Yeah.
A loss here to Philly, a poorly coached Philly team, I might add. I think it might be time to think about the future if you're the Cowboys with a loss here this week.
Listen, you never know what happens in an interdivisional matchup in game. So, you never know what happens there. But yes, Philly should beat them, and they should beat them handily. Let's get another response. Hear what else people are saying when it comes to, can the Cowboys survive without Dak Prescott?
This next one is Kenneth Smith on Facebook. He says, same thing we're saying, honestly. He said they can't survive with him playing.
Wow. I wonder if that's Ken Smith here from Fox 5. It might be different.
Ken Smith burner?
It could be Kenneth. It wouldn't be too much of a burner if he just added the Nth. But listen, I think the part of the equation we have to talk about here on SOS now is, of course, the Jerry Jones component to this.
Yeah.
When it comes to Jerry Jones, this is a guy who does know football, actually. You know, he played college football. He's a self-made billionaire. So I have a lot of respect.
Can we say he knew football?
Yeah.
Can we say that?
That's a good way. That's why I love you. That's why James is he's a great co-host for me, because it's true, James. You're on point. I just wanted to preface that I have a lot of respect. He's a self-made billionaire. He really, they had those Jimmy Johnson years, but a lot has changed since the Emmitt Smith, the Troy Aikman years, the Roger Staubach years.
It's 30 years ago.
Cowboys. It's a lot different. So Jerry Jones is really running the team 100%. He's the GM. He's the owner. His son, Stephen Jones, works with him. What's your assessment on that? I mean, can the Cowboys find any type of success and get back to the promised land while Jerry Jones is alive?
No. I think you look around, Cowboys Nation, you ask any Cowboys fan, they're going to tell you it starts up top with Jerry Jones. And as great as he was for them and as iconic as Jerry Jones is, there comes a time when it's time to step down, kind of give up some of that power, some of that control you have, and give it up to some newer blood, some people who are with the times, because what was the last Super Bowl the Cowboys won? 95, 96?
Yeah.
Something around that. They haven't been to an NFC title game in who knows how long.
The crazy thing is, for someone that's your age, what year were you born?
97. They haven't won a Super Bowl since I've been alive.
So they haven't really been tremendously good, throughout the...
They've had moments, but they haven't even been to an NFC title game in I don't know how many years.
They haven't been to a Super Bowl.
Right.
So, I mean, it's crazy because there's a whole part of the population here in our country that assumes and identifies the Cowboys brand, America's team, as winners. But for people that are your age, who are almost 30 years old, the Cowboys haven't been winning for a long time. Yeah. So it's fascinating, their situation. I think Dak is a good quarterback when the run game is going, when protection's going. He's a lot like a Brock Purdy to me. You don't think so?
I would much rather have a Dak Prescott.
Well, I think, but they're similar. I think Dak's a little better, but I think they're very similar. When play action's working and things are going, he can actually elevate his game and lead a team down the field. For sure,
but I don't think that makes him any different than any other quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Those are the, you need the run game to get going. It's the same for Mahomes and Josh Allen as it is for Drake May and Jacoby Brissett. Those things are true for every quarterback.
There's certain quarterbacks that, even with a lot of a bad situation, they capture lightning in a bottle. They're able to take their team to the next level without some of those things.
And we've seen like near elite play from Dak.
We've seen almost MVP quality seasons.
And I'm a Dak fan. So I don't mean to be knocking the guy.
Yeah.
Because I do think you could probably win a Super Bowl with a Dak Prescott.
I agree. Now, how can you win a Super Bowl right now? Well, here's my question. This is a good question for you. If you feel you can win a Super Bowl with quarterback Dak Prescott, and you have a quarterback in Mike McCarthy who already has won a Super Bowl, why can't they find some cohesion? Because they have had rosters before where the running game was good, where the offensive line was functioning at a high level. So what's been the problem there?
It feels like it's been the big moment, it's been the big moment for Dak that he hasn't been able to overcome. And listen, when we sit here and we're talking, we have seen MVP caliber play from Dak. It's been in the regular season. It hasn't been on the biggest stage. It hasn't been past the wild card or divisional round.
Yeah.
So I think that is part of it. I think the other part is Mike McCarthy. He won a Super Bowl. That was 15 years ago.
With Rodgers.
Right. With Aaron Rodgers, who, was playing out of his mind at the time. So
it's interesting. There's a lot of dissension there as well. Just bad things going on and off the field. We saw Dak on the sideline during that game say an expletive. He was like, we blank, we blank suck. So, I mean, a lot of bad stuff there. Diggs is getting chippy with reporters and had to make an apology. So
think about that.
The mood and the vibe. I mean,
it's frustrating.
Jerry's yelling at radio hosts like you and I.
He's talking about, and this is to go back a little bit. When we're sitting here talking about Jerry Jones and how he's just he's out of touch. You know, you can't have a guy at his age have that much power up and down throughout the organization. And I think this really kind of encapsulates the situation that the Cowboys are dealing with when it comes to Jerry Jones. Earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, Jerry Jones was talking about, you know, some of the issues going on within the Cowboys organization, and he brought up a story of Michael Irvin from the 90s. And that's just kind of, I think it is a perfect encapsulation of what is going on there. You know what I mean? The 90s are 30 years ago, brother. It's time to move on. Yeah. And for Cowboys fans, I think a lot of them feel the same way.
Yeah, 100%. James, as we head to break, let's get one last response from the good people at home.
This is Robert Tate on Facebook. He says, "We'll be better off without that loser."
Welcome back to Sound Off Sports. I'm joined right now by, I mean, you think this is just coming from the ether. Where is this music emanating from? It's emanating right there. J.R. Beatbox.
What's going on, Mike?
I'm just gonna leave. I don't think we can do better than that. That's that. That was the best introduction I've ever been a part of. I think
career. That was a great intro, especially you saying, "You know what? Just do you when I count in."
You know what?
That's all right.
That's what people want to see. They just want to see J.R. Beatbox do him. The One Drop Foundation. This Saturday, Springs Preserve, we're going to be talking about the Walk for Water 2024. A lot of great stuff going down, but I want to talk about you before all that because, listen, we got to talk water, climate crisis, all that kind of good stuff in our community. For me as an East Coaster, you're an East Coaster like me too.
Yes.
Whenever I got to say water, I grew up saying water. How do you say water or water?
Water. Fun fact, since I started beatboxing, my voice changes all the time. So sometimes the native Bronx comes out of me, and then because I do so many high frequencies with my vocal cords, when I say certain words, it allows me to sound different. So water. Is this all?
Because I don't hear the Bronx in your voice at all.
I think when the attitude comes out, and I rarely get mad. I'm a very peaceful person. So
I can appreciate that. I'll tell you a story about me. When I first, I'm getting old. I've been on TV for a little bit now. When I started my career, I was so green, dude. I was saying, I had a segment at my last station called the water cooler question of the day. And I used to say, it was in Texas. And I was like, they call me a Yankee every day because I would just say water instead of water, you know?
Yeah, my mother is straight like she's like water. She's like water. And she says soda.
Soda. That's my mom says that too.
Yeah.
Pizza.
Yeah.
Everything with an A has the R at the end. See, we have a lot in common and with the moms, and then after that it stops.
It does.
Yeah, there's not much after that. But one thing I would love to be able to do, because I want to know the story of how you found this gift, because from what I've done research-wise, it seems like 16 is kind of when you started identifying a lot of your musical ability. Tell us the story of how you find this. Are you just in a Barnes & Noble one day and you figure out you can beatbox, or how do you discover that you have this skill?
Honestly, I grew up in a very Hispanic culture. My mother's Puerto Rican, my father's Dominican. When we moved out here from New York, my father was fighting for Golden Gloves in the boxing industry.
Wow.
So I grew up in a lot of Latin type music in my life. When I turned 15, I got introduced to hip hop. And since then, I fell in love with the music of hip hop.
It took you 15 years to get introduced to hip hop?
You got to think about it. Like, I grew up in a culture where we love weekend barbecues and pool parties.
Yeah.
And the Latin community has its own movement, you know? So my childhood had a really great family-oriented, like, feeling. And then when I branched off into high school, teenage years, you start meeting friends and you start getting into other small communities and you come across new things, right? So now you're stepping out the house, you're stepping into the world. When I stepped into the world my freshman year of high school, I introduced myself to a gentleman in my class that was beatboxing. He then gave me my first 6 tracks on the CD, and I fell in love with beatboxing. That was my introduction to hip hop.
Wow.
And because of beatboxing, guy introduced me to De La Soul, Wu-Tang,
Yeah,
and then just stuff like that. And it was it took my whole teenage.
So I saw a few of your big influences: Roselle, Kenny Mohammed, Scratch from the Roots, all that kind of stuff. So you start identifying with this whole beatboxing thing. You have a different kind of boxing in your blood from your dad.
Genetically, yes.
You got a different kind of boxing, but then you're like, no, I want to do the beatboxing stuff.
Yeah, those 3 names that you just said were the greatest influences in my teenage years. You know how we come across music and we gravitate towards artists. You're like, man, I want to be like musically. People love Jimi Hendrix and so forth. In the beatboxing world, those 3 were my favorites. So I picked up their techniques.
Right.
Me being a sponge, I self-taught myself. So Kenny Muhammad had the orchestra like.
Gotcha.
Roselle had the.
Wow, right.
Scratch from the Roots was all vocal scratching. So.
Right. Yeah. Which I'm familiar with his stuff because I'm a big Roots guy, especially from Philly.
Yeah.
Questlove, all that kind
Questlove,
of
all
stuff.
those guys.
So, wow. So Captain Kirk, all my favorite guys. So, so all 3 of those are distinct kind of ways to enter into the beatbox world. Now, I don't know a lot about beatboxing. I know a lot about sports. So those are like 3 different disciplines, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a boxer and have 3 different disciplines, that's pretty rare for a boxer to kind of have 3 different disciplines. For a beatboxer, is it rare to be able to do all 3 of those and navigate between all 3 of those different types of beatboxing, or do you need to specialize?
Historically speaking, since I got into like the original hip hop culture, there's new age beatboxers where they're all about drum and bass and techno and different techniques where they've manipulated sounds in many ways that I may not even be like keen to, but we all have our styles and our charisma and our characteristics. So through my art form, through those 3 influences, I was able to build what I represent.
Interesting. So
you find your own voice. You find your own, how do you present it?
You know what's so crazy as I'm just sitting here watching you do this so effortlessly? It's like if you said, Mike, I'll give you $1 million, beatbox something for me right now. I wouldn't even know how to even find it within myself. You know what I'm saying?
Boots and cats. Just say boots and cats.
Boots and cats.
And then say the name Eric and then take the C off the end. So you get Eric. And you just slap it in a couple of words and numbers. Eric, one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I teach kids how to kind of like break from being uncomfortable and teach them some certain techniques. And after that, we dive deeper into techniques as in like vocals. Speaking
of diving deeper and digging deep, I think there's something very interesting. So, obviously we're gearing up for this Saturday, the One Drop Foundation. It's a great thing to have you there for the Walk for Water. I'm going to make sure I say water instead of water. But everybody is welcome, no matter how you pronounce water. It's interesting in terms of digging deep, diving deep. Music is one part of your life, and also fitness is another big part of your life. And it's hard. It would be hard to not think about the similarities of how free and vulnerable you have to be a beatboxer and to go through the process of learning how to do it, the judgment, even being a professional beatboxer and being in front of people and maneuvering and manipulating your voice in that way. A lot of that, I could see how that could be a lot of angst-ridden stuff for a lot of people. So you growing up, I understand you dealt with a little bit of an obesity kind of situation. And
not even a little, Mike. I was definitely obese. I grew up, again, in a very Latin culture, so we ate a lot and we hung out a lot, but we were not active. My father traveled the world. My mother kept me in the books. With that being said, when she was working multiple jobs to provide, he was providing too, but from a distance.
Right.
I raised myself majority of the time trying to compensate, and because we had access to like certain things at that time, I was you're not gonna tell no kid just to eat vegetables. No, I'm gonna go for the Hostess cupcakes and things that are accessible in the fridge that can take 30 seconds to a minute. That carried on through my teenage years, and I realized I wanted to change when I graduated high school, and I got into another stage in my life where at that moment I became a culinary cook.
Wow.
So I have a culinary background, and I worked as a culinary cook, and I was like, you know what? I have access to good food.
Right.
So let me start implementing what makes me feel better, and then doing research, and then also building a reputation in the city as an artist, and being, I have an end goal. But in order to get to that end goal, I physically have to be ready for those opportunities.
And just mentally, you know,
Mentally,
I mean, there's the connection there of being free with yourself as a beatboxer and also needing to feel and look your best and be able to strip yourself of those chains.
Yeah, and feel vulnerable too. Like at that time, like I was very insecure. Like I didn't know. All I knew is like I got to be the best, and we have to look the part, and we have to. But I didn't have no guidance, so I kind of took a step back and I did more research, and I started finding values of myself where I'm like, you know what, consistency is key. Keep it a long-term goal, and then short-term goals in between, and over time you see the results. So I went from the heaviest of my life being 280 to being 220.
Wow.
And then now I'm at the point now where I'm raising a beautiful 13-year-old daughter, and she gets the best food because I teach her the nutritional like facts of like this is what we're putting in our bodies.
And you got that culinary background.
Yeah, so so food is accessible. I'm like I could make you a meal in 15 minutes.
See, I love that. It really makes you the perfect guy for this Saturday. Tell us a little bit about why you're so excited about, you know, this whole event, the Walk for Water, the One Drop Foundation, what you're going to be delivering to the people. Because I mean, when we get that crux of, you know, fitness, a little bit of entertainment, it's all the good stuff we want.
See, the foundation is a beautiful thing. They took the opportunity to believe in me in the early stages when it started. And I showed up and I showed out. I loved what it represented and how it provided multiple spaces in communities and cultures and countries to have that access of water. You know, I'm a fine example of hydration, and if we could go to our dispenser, water dispenser right now with a few steps. Most families have to commute to over 2 miles, up to 3 miles, just to have access for water within a day. And that's just for one day. So when we put the program together and they kind of broke things down to me, I really took in that information, and I was like, I want to represent that.
I love that.
And they continuously reintroduced myself for the 2024 Walk for Water, and we're back and better than ever, you know? So
I hear there's a little bit of a hiatus. It's back now. It's all about, you know, raising funds and awareness for water issues, both here locally but also globally. So there's going to be a lot of fun stuff going down this Saturday. Springs Preserve, 8 a.m. is the start on Saturday. And of course, we're going to have R Beatbox there working, doing his thing. It's so fascinating hearing your story and how it really is so intertwined and connected to everything that you're doing. If you had a little, because you're very inspirational kind of dude, you know, if people at home are listening to this, they're watching right now, what are a couple of just things, take home, something they can implement in their life right away that they can enact that would just get them feeling a little bit more like R Beatbox?
I would tell everybody to open up their options and take in information. Information is truly key. So when you process things and you really think about it and how you can implement it in your life, it just takes a few little moments of actions to see everything overall come together. I'm again, culinary background, so I learned how to multitask. You have to put the steak down, blanch the vegetables, and do all this. And at the end of the course, everything is plated perfectly. I just translated that into my career, my parenthood as a father, my friends, and make sure I invest in my friends and the community. So over time, it's just like you're a self-product of just
snowballs.
You know, it just feels good.
Yeah.
And because of that, people gravitate towards that. And that's a beautiful thing about it being inspirational through your own actions. Live by it and then represent by it, and then you'll see everybody kind of like, hey, they'll start asking you questions. You give them the answers that they need.
I love all that stuff, man,
yeah.
And it's great. I also was doing a lot of research, checking you out. You also did a Tiny Desk video, like a little submission kind of thing.
Yeah,
we gotta get you on there. I love.
Man.
Who's your favorite Tiny Desk
Usher. I don't know why.
Usher. It
Usher
was a
really,
good one,
that was a
right?
good one. And then we had, who else was on there? Erica Badu was
She was
good.
good. T-Pain was interesting, right?
yeah.
Because no auto tune.
No auto tune.
So he's got a real good in an acoustic light. He's pretty good too.
Yeah. See, one of my things in the career of music is there's all these great avenues and all these great ways to express yourself. And sometimes people are reaching for the stars and it's right there. But I've always found out that like Las Vegas has been my home and my hub, and this is where I love putting my efforts in. The world is a beautiful place, but I prioritize my fatherhood. So besides traveling the world, I take care of my 13-year-old. And she comes first, and then after that, I'm one whole. So how that ties into everything is Tiny Desk is a goal. Yes, that's one of many goals I would love to be on.
Yeah.
When it presents itself, I'll be ready for it. But for right now, it's being involved in the community. It's showing up, showing out, seeing how our home can be established, and we build from there. There's so many moving parts in this city, and it's growing rapidly, and I'd love to be a part of as much as I can.
There you go. Well, I can't say it any better. That's the way to get involved in our community, find out more about our great community here in Las Vegas, and go to this amazing event this Saturday, November 9th.
Yes.
It's going to be at Springs Preserve, 8 a.m. Go there. It's a great walk opportunity. Learn a little bit.
I'm gonna walk.
You're
it
gonna
out.
walk.
I'm
You're
gonna do
gonna
the fitness.
beatbox.
We have cast members of Fantasy there.
Cirque du Soleil.
Cirque du Soleil, Blue Man Group. For those families that are going to be there with their families and their young ones, we have face painting, entertainment, food. We have a lot of things to offer. So definitely get there early enough to enroll and experience everything we have to offer.
And this is like the perfect time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like a Hallmark movie outside right now. That's why I even got this on.
You look nice. I like the jacket.
It's just like am I a professor or am I just really enjoying pumpkin spice lattes? You don't know. It's kind of, I'm in that in between.
I had a cardigan in the car.
No, you didn't.
I had a cardigan.
See, the problem is me in a cardigan. Nobody wants to see that.
Nobody
People want to see you and see because it goes.
I explore my.
You got the arm sleeves and you got a cardigan. That's the way to do it.
That's pretty much true. I also, I have this really cool opportunity tonight at the Cosmos, so I kind of brought an outfit on the go. But yeah, I like how different
Tell
outfits.
us what's going on at the Cosmo. We love the Cosmopolitan, of course. This is gonna go down before you all hear this at home. But tell us what you got going.
No, honestly, I work strictly through private companies where I'm able to really be creative and interact and integrate beatboxing with entertainment. So tonight is going to be a corporate event. This client is buying a band, and I'm the beatboxer of this band.
Ooh.
And I'm live percussion. I'm live scratching over the music and top 40 music that you all love. I do multiple different concepts like Bridgerton. It's a famous show. Everybody loves Bridgerton.
I know people love it.
And we have some hands raising in the audience right now.
So what do you mean? You could just do different genre. Like
yeah,
you're just gonna do let's do it. Let's do like a rapid fire. Okay,
right.
Let's do a rapid fire. Here we go. Start with Bridgerton.
All right, so Bridgerton track will have a pianist do something. I will play that track. I have a live violinist that will play something over that.
Yeah, is it going to be Mariko? Is that your?
No, Mariko is my bestie.
Yeah, Mariko's
oh my God,
good, I know her.
Shout out to her. This is actually Tiana. She actually moved out here from Russia.
Oh. Okay.
And she's an amazing violinist, and she's able to collaborate with me. While she's doing that, I'm doing the and and then I'm also doing the percussion behind the Bridgerton pianist track while she's live playing the violin. So things like that are experiences, and I create those. I love creating experiences.
Wow.
So I bring that to the table for Saturday.
It's like environment. Oh.
Yeah. So I bring that to the table for Saturday is because not only will we be warming up, but I'm able to interact myself with the DJ and collab with the audience and do some cool things for the kids that they've never heard before, and then introduce them to a new realm of music through creativity. And it's all being fitness bound and just I love it.
I love it. All right, so can we do a quick rapid fire? Can I how would this work? Can I give you just spit out genres and then you can bounce back to different genres? Or what's the best way to do that? Is that a good way to do it?
Yeah, I'll start it right now. Okay.
Okay.
Pick one.
Go to jazz. Go to more rock. Okay, soul. R&B soul. Wow. Look at how you can do that. What is the exercise to get your diaphragm and just your cardiovascular? Like,
My personal
cardiovascular workout.
I'm on a
right?
new thing now.
Yeah, tell us how we can.
I love these wind bikes. I'm in love with wind bikes.
Like
the the big giant wheel, and then you just go like this. It's resistant.
Yeah.
So you're basically riding a bike and it's blowing wind.
Those are the things you see at the gym that nobody's ever
never
on.
uses.
Yeah.
Nobody ever uses
Like
in the
during
gym.
COVID, those were the safest ones to go on. Like if you wanted to make sure you're definitely not going to get COVID, let me go on that.
I go on all the machines people do not use.
but
But it works.
Is that like a really, because I don't know, it must
Your
be
heart, yeah, because it's a full body workout. Think of it, if you look at NBA players or football players on the sideline, you see them on the wind bike because they're staying loose and they're keeping their mobility, accessible of them doing burst workouts. So before I train, I just move and I open up all these different ligaments and joints and I warm up. And it also raises my heart rate. And I'm able to track my heart rate because we don't ever want it to peak. We wanted a nice sweet spot where we're getting sweat and we're burning fat, but we're not ripping away muscle and strength. So I've been really diving deeper into, hey, I'm 6'2", 220, and I train like an athlete, but I make noise for a living. Hey.
That's a great way to live right there. Real quickly, give everybody at home your social so we can connect with you, see how great you are in person.
Instagram is JR Beatbox. That's JAYR Beatbox. Everything across the board is pretty much there. If you just Google, I'm Googleable.
You are.
Yeah.
And you enunciated that tremendously. I think it's the wind. It's the wind.
It's the wind bike kicking it, Mike. Man, I gotta say thank you once again for having me on the segment.
Of course, you're such a pleasure to have, man. A very interesting story. We got to have you back sometime. And
anytime.
Listen, we're gonna have the powers that be here are going to work with you on a contract so you can just do all of our theme music.
Yeah, we got theme music, opening, closing,
stingers. Like, my producer's right there. You'll talk to James.
Shout out to the producer.
He's the guy. He'll make it work for us. All right, guys. Listen, this Saturday, Springs Preserve, Water Drop, One Drop Foundation, Walk for Water. Make sure you go check out all that great stuff. JR Beatbox is going to be there. It's going to be a great family fun event. Starts at 8 a.m. We'll see you there on Saturday, and we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to Sound Off Sports. All right, so we have another topic to discuss right now. Head coach Dennis Allen of the Saints has been fired. He's also a guy who was fired by the Raiders. Yes, he's the first coach to be fired by two different teams starting the same quarterback. And yes, that was Derek Carr. So, James, let's talk about Dennis Allen being fired as the head coach of the Saints. What was your initial reaction to this news?
I hate to talk this way about a man who lost his job because, we're talking about real people here, but he wasn't working. And if you're a Saints fan, it's almost like good riddance. What's his record in New Orleans? 18-25. I'm not quite sure why they hired him in the first place. Defensive coach. He worked under Sean Payton there for a while, but his record in Oakland was 8-28.
Yeah.
So, I understand that people can make strides throughout their career and maybe work their way back up to a head coaching position, but I didn't like the hire from day one. It didn't work out, and now they're on a 7-game skid and just lost their head coach. So,
well, here's how it happens. Okay, so first of all, a guy like this, you get two chances really to be a head coach in the NFL. Now that you failed at two, you're done. Here's the thing though about Dennis Allen. He's a great defensive coordinator. So a lot of guys, and it's okay to be honest, a lot of guys are great coordinators and not good head coaches. And that's okay. Not everybody's meant to be a head coach in the NFL. Dennis Allen is an elite defensive coordinator, and he will undoubtedly get another defensive coordinator job because he's good at it. He's just not a good head coach. And I think a lot of times when you're asking the question, well, Sean Payton, an elite coach, an elite head coach who transforms organizations in record time, look what he's doing with Denver, Super Bowl champ. they are afraid of change. They're like, okay, well, we have a good culture here. We feel like Sean Payton developed a good culture. Let's just snag the guy who's already in the room, who's part of the Sean Payton tree, and just get him in the mix rather than having somebody come in who has to build a brand new culture. It's kind of like people who are thinking, owners and executives thinking, listen, we want to speed up this process. We don't want to bring in a new guy who's got to start up a brand new culture. But the thing is, there is no fast track for success. You can't just assume that Dennis Allen's going to be able to translate and become the head coach that you're hoping him to be. You really need it to do. You need to do it the hard way. You got to start from the ground up, right?
You can't just because he worked under Peyton and just because he worked on, I'll use Belichick as another one.
100%.
Like, just because he comes from the Peyton tree or just because he comes from the Belichick tree doesn't mean he's going to be the right guy. So sometimes it's okay to go outside of the organization to go get your next head coach. And I thought that's what they should have done. They did not, but now look where they're at.
100%. We saw those issues from the Belichick tree early on, with the guys like the Romeo Crennels and, the Charlie Weiss guys. They didn't really find any success.
Matt Patricia, Josh
didn't
McDaniels,
work,
didn't work.
Vrabel's really the only one.
Vrabel and what's the DC's name?
Brian Flores.
Brian Flores.
Yeah, he was a pretty good head coach with Miami as well. But there are certain trees that work. The Andy Reid tree kind of has
Sean McVay, Kyle
tree.
Shanahan.
But the thing is, a lot of times those guys have to go somewhere else. Right. And they have to develop, they're bringing a culture that they developed somewhere and implementing it to a new place.
Right.
So for them to just say, hey, let's look into the room next door and give Dennis Allen a chance, I guess that's a considerate thing, but you can't assume that it's going to be a pleasant, different surprise and just think that, this is going to be the same thing we had with Sean Payton. Now, let's just be fair. Devil's advocate, James, let me ask you this. Because we wanted to highlight to our viewers and everybody at home, listen, he's the first coach to be fired from 2 different jobs, 2 different teams with the same quarterback.
And I don't think that's fair.
Well, let's talk about that because I want you to get your take on that. And I want to know, in posing the question to you, how much of this is Derek Carr's fault?
Listen, Derek Carr has not played well this year. And what is striking is how well the Saints offense looked the first 2 games of the season where they put up 47 and 44 points. Since then, they're on a 7-game skid where they're averaging 16 points a game. So how do you go from averaging, I don't know what that math is, like 45 and a half points a game the first 2 games to averaging 16 points a game?
Yeah, it's like a 30-point difference.
What happened? It's striking. I think it says a lot about, Derek Carr is not to be without blame here. He deserves some blame. And I think Bobby Slowick, the OC there, he needs to get it.
Clint Kubiak.
Clint Kubiak. Sorry, I get him and Slowick mixed up.
Yep.
Yes, Clint Kubiak. He deserves blame as well. But, this is not their mess. This is Dennis Allen's mess. The track record is there to suggest that the reason behind all of this, behind the 7-game skid from the Saints, is it all stems from Dennis Allen. And you talk about, he's an elite defensive coordinator. Maybe he is. But his side of the ball hasn't been good this year for the Saints either. They're, I think they're giving up the 5th highest yards per game and the 7th most points per game. So, this is much more Dennis Allen than it is Derek Carr. And the last thing, when we're sitting here talking about Dennis Allen has been fired twice while Derek Carr has been the starting quarterback, Derek Carr played 4 games for him when he was in Oakland and Dennis Allen got fired there. So Derek Carr is kind of a convenient scapegoat in that way.
You were talking about messes. In terms of messes, let's talk about a mess that kind of unfolded regarding this whole issue, and it stemmed more from Derek Carr and Chris Olave. We got to realize there's a lot of injuries going on, but Michael Thomas, the former All-Pro wide receiver who had a lot of success in New Orleans, went to Twitter. He went to the Twitter sphere and started talking about his quarterback, his former quarterback, well, actually, he didn't really work with Derek Carr, but started talking a little bit about the quarterback's play and what that means for Olave and other people. Tell us a little bit about what you thought about that situation.
I think I think Michael Thomas needs to just look himself in the mirror a little bit here, because Derek Carr is a guy who, regardless of how you feel about his talents on the field, is by all accounts a good man, right? A good person, a good teammate, somebody who's never had any problems with teammates before, never had any off the field issues. So I think Michael Thomas needs to look at himself and realize one of us is still playing and the other sitting on the couch watching. So Michael Thomas, just shut up. Just shut up. This has nothing to do
salty,
with you.
As the kids would say.
Yeah, he just needs to, I don't know why Michael Thomas thinks he needs to interject here.
It's interesting stuff.
As somebody who's not even playing. And you saw Chris Olave's brother was piling on in that Twitter back and forth as well. It is what it is.
Listen, we're wishing Chris Olave
of course,
a healthy and speedy recovery, and we'll see what unfolds now in New Orleans with a brand new interim head coach. But we're going to be right back after a short break. Coming up next, we have Sink or Swim.
You wanted to make everybody happy. He wants to make everybody happy. He's having these kumbayas. I'm taking a week off so we can find ourselves. They need to be out there practicing, not, doing Zen or yoga or whatever the hell they're doing. They need to be mean like the old Raiders were. That's why I'm not a fan anymore. But the old Raiders, bring them back. And the son, he needs to be like the daddy. He didn't take no crap from nobody. But you keep that Antonio Pierce on there, and that's all he's going to do is keep doing the kumbaya moments, patting people on the back, giving them participation trophies, showing up in his low rider. I mean, who cares what he drives? He needs to drive a team to the championship.
All right, that is one of the most classic rant calls we have gotten here on Sound Off Sports. Thank you so much to Ruben Gutierrez. Ruben said a lot of great stuff in there.
His call was longer. It was too long for our purposes here, so we had to cut him down a little bit. But it was a great call. Thank you for calling.
In terms of the stuff that he mentioned, I do like a lot of it. Listen, listening to Ruben and his thoughts, my biggest thing that I'm reflecting upon is something that Michael Lombardi always talks about on his shows, which is practice. And you can tell which teams in the NFL are getting better because those are the teams that are practicing. I know a lot of teams are worried about, getting hurt, maybe being, riding their players too tough, certain coaches, but it's, according to Michael, the teams that are improving upon the season are the teams that are practicing. The teams that are getting worse or staying stagnant are not practicing. So practice is a big driving force. But yes, I do think it's fascinating because, as Ruben was mentioning, a lot of the Antonio Pierce promise, and I think a lot of the excitement that was surrounding this team, people, it was garnering a lot of excitement, this move, and making him the interim to head coach officially, because guys like Max Crosby, guys like Devontae Adams, they were going to bat for him.
Yeah,
they wanted him to get that job. And I think a lot of people thought he was going to bring a swagger to the Raiders. And I think if we're talking from an intangible standpoint, that was one of those things. We kind of knew his head coach experience wasn't plentiful. He didn't really have such a great record even when he was a head coach in high school. So it was more so like, we're thinking this is going to be a player's coach who's bringing a culture, bringing a vibe, bringing a swagger to an organization. And unfortunately, we've been devoid of swagger. So, James, how can a guy who's really bringing that to the table, we're not thinking about X's and O's, we're not thinking about play calling, we're thinking about swagger. How can the guy who was promised to bring that type of swagger, how can we be so devoid of any swagger?
I think because when that's all you're promising is swagger and effort, because that's really what this was all about, was when they fired Josh McDaniels, how hard the guys played for him down the stretch there, and I think they were like 5-4 or something around that. It was, these guys are going to play hard for you.
But let me jump in. Here's my question. now, seeing the evidence of that, maybe they weren't playing hard for Coach Antonio Pierce. Maybe they were playing hard in response, in a revenge type of mentality against Josh McDaniels. And there's a difference there.
No, I think when any coach gets fired throughout the history of the NFL, there's a new juice that kind of hits whatever team just lost their coach. And I think that's what happened here.
But you can conflate playing hard for Pierce rather when instead they're playing hard in spite of Josh McDaniels.
Yeah, and I think maybe that was part of it. But I think what you're trying to say here is there's a difference between playing hard for Antonio Pierce and just that new juice, that coach just got fired, new juice sort of deal here. And I think the problem with Antonio Pierce is that he was not qualified. Let's just call it what it is. He wasn't qualified to be named the head coach. I think a lot of times when you're hiring a coach, you have to look at the guys that the players wanted. And, Max Crosby really went to bat, as you mentioned. And I think the fan base saw how that season ended and also was kind of like, Antonio Pierce is our guy.
Let me ask you this. Is a successful franchise operating based upon the notions of the crowd and the fans and the players, or are they just going about it in terms of
I'm not saying I agree with what happened. I'm just telling you that's what in my eyes what happened.
That's what happened, and the question is, does that breed success? And probably not.
Absolutely not.
As an owner, you need to take a stand, and you have to do a true hiring process, and you have to think about who is somebody who is going to develop culture. It doesn't happen overnight. Who's somebody who players might not love because he's working them hard, but they respect him and they trust that this person knows more football than I do, And I think that's a hard thing to do because, frankly, there just doesn't seem like there's a lot of coaches in today's NFL that breed that confidence where another player who's been playing for a lot of years wouldn't know more than that guy or what, So to me, that's a big issue because although Devontae and Max Crosby go to bat for a guy like that, do they really know what's best for them in terms of the coach that they need? Because once the proof isn't in the pudding, once you're not winning, then kind of everybody's like, well,
what the heck?
What the heck?
There's got to be an adult in the room to kind of, because everybody was, you remember they were smoking cigars in the locker room after they got a win after McDaniels was fired. There was a lot of people were fired up. They were hyped for the prospect of what Antonio Pierce could be. But at the end of the day, he wasn't qualified. And, and despite what the fans wanted, despite what the players wanted, you got to really take a hard look at who you're hiring and ask yourself the hard question, is this the right guy for the job? And I think a lot of Raiders fans maybe deep down knew that. And I think a lot of people within the front office, and the higher-ups within the Raiders organization knew that, but didn't have the heart in the moment to acknowledge it and act upon it. So they went with a guy who is not qualified, a guy who didn't have any head coaching experience anywhere, I think maybe outside of the high school ranks. And now they're here. And as much as we love Antonio Pierce, the guy, right? Like, I think anybody would want to play for a guy like Antonio Pierce, but he just needs to get more reps under his belt, coaching reps, in other areas, work your way up from a linebackers coach to a D coordinator, because he jumped right from a backers coach to head coach. It just happened too quickly.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and you start wondering, if he did have better play callers, better coordinators.
Well, and I think
would some of his, blemishes be masked by having really great offensive like if his offensive coordinator was Bobby Slowick or Ben Johnson, and then his defensive coordinator was Steve Spagnuolo, now is the team finally good and he can be a culture creator?
I think maybe, and I think Antonio Pierce, when I talk about his lack of experience, I think he acknowledged that. You think about the guys that he brought in: Marvin Lewis, Joe Philbin. Tom Coughlin was helping out in training camp. Now you bring in Norv Turner, and there's another one who I'm missing. But I think he understood, like, hey, I don't know everything. I'm going to be learning on the job. I need to bring in people who have been around the block, know what they're doing, have been in the game for a long time to help me out. Unfortunately, it's not working.
Yeah. It's a shame, and the Raiders have so much to improve upon. I mean, the good thing is that they do have some talent in the room. You hit on a Brock Bowers. You need to hit on those first-round draft picks. So hitting on a Brock Bowers helps the team a lot. Having a guy like Max Crosby at a premium position, edge rusher in the NFL, having one of the top 5 guys in the league, that helps a lot. Now you got to hit on quarterback, and you got to really hope that, you're going to get the guy you really want, because if you do another Jamarcus Russell, you're just set back again, So you got to make sure, if you're 2-7 right now and you're going to keep losing, you got to hit on that quarterback, and you got to get some good foundational pieces to help that quarterback. You need a line. You need some good coaches. I mean, listen, the Cliff Kingsbury thing is a very telling situation here. This is a guy who is in the building here in Henderson on a job audition with the Raiders for offensive coordinator, and he basically skipped out and ended up going. Adam Peters, the GM president, got him with the Commanders and said, "Hey,
look what they're doing.
Look what he's done, and look, he's he struggled as a head coach with Arizona, but he knows."
But as we mentioned, that's okay. Some people aren't meant to be a head coach. Some people are just great coordinators, and we need those.
Yeah. So last thing for you as we're wrapping this up, James, here's my question, because I think we do have to give credit to Antonio Pearson, knowing that he does lack experience. And what has he done? He surrounded himself with a lot of experience. He has an assistant head coach in Marvin Lewis, was a head coach with the Bengals. He has now the offensive line coach who was doing other stuff, Joe Philbin. He was with the organization, used to be a head coach in Miami. He's there. Now they bring in Scott Turner. He was like a quarterback's passing game coordinator kind of guy. Now he's the new offensive coordinator, stepping in for the fired Luke Getsy. And his father has now joined the equation, the former head coach Norv Turner, who was a head coach with the Raiders, head coach with Washington, as well as the Chargers. So, James, having all these guys in the room, plus we got to mention Tom Coughlin, another advisor, who's Super Bowl champion head coach multiple times, obviously. So having all this experience in the room, is that going to help? Are we going to see a new Raiders team? What does this look? What's the outlook for this new team moving forward, having stripped away, an offensive coordinator, an offensive line coach, some other things? What is it going to look like now?
I don't think anything is going to change. I think this season for the Raiders is a wash. If you're one of the coaches and the players, all you can do is go to work every day and keep trying to scrape together W's, because at the end of the day, you're putting out tape for your next job. But if you are one of these higher ups, if you're Mark Davis, Mark Davis he would never say that they're trying to lose, but the Raiders should be trying to lose. And nobody would ever admit it, but that's what the Raiders should be doing. They need a quarterback.
I mean, if you're playing Desmond Ridder, you're kind of trying to lose.
Gardner Minshew is not the guy, all right? Aiden O'Connell's not the guy. We know Desmond Ridder's not the guy. The only way out of this is with a quarterback. So you're not going anywhere anyway.
This is why I was surprised they weren't more sellers at the deadline.
Yeah.
Because I know you want some pieces, like on Sin City Beat, I'll do a plug for ourselves. Vince Sapienza, I posed to him, anchor reporter here at Fox. I said, why not be even more sellers at the deadline? And he was saying, well, you're going to want a Jacoby Myers in the fold when you draft a quarterback next year, so you have some, throwing options and some targets around you. But I think you still probably should have stripped the team of more players. Because I think this is a studs. I think this is stripping it down to the studs kind of situation.
The only, reasoning, because I know we talked a lot about, should the Raiders consider trading a Max Crosby? Because that's a guy who you could probably get multiple first-round picks for. And sure, if you don't think you can turn this around in one season, maybe you do think about getting rid of a Max Crosby. But the reality is, if you finish poorly enough this season to where you're picking in the top 5 and you hit on one of these quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, whoever else is going to be going in the top 5, we might have a C.J. Stroud Texans situation where the next year you're a playoff team.
Right.
Right? Now, I think the roster is good enough. What I don't think the coaching staff is going to be here past this season.
See, I'm worried. I mean, you're in the AFC West. You're in a tough division. Chargers look good. Harbaugh turned this team around immediately. So he's like adding a top-tier quarterback to your team just from a culture standpoint. Team looks tremendously different. That's a tough team. You got Mahomes and the Chiefs in there. So that's an issue.
It's another 10 plus
in
years.
itself. So I don't know. Like this is a lot different. Like people have to recognize the Texans situation is the fact that they're in,
part of it is
South.
how poor their division is, of course.
So there's some issues there, and I don't know if it can be a turnaround process. I think
the division's tough, no question.
I think there's 3 guys. I mean, even Denver, we got to say, look at the turnaround there. I mean, Bo Nix, say what you want about the situation, but who thought they were going to be this competitive and this good? They were competitive last year without the quarterback. Yeah. And now it looks like Peyton found the guy who can function in his system.
I'm not ready to crown Bo Nix the guy for Sean Payton quite yet, but being in the Raiders situation right now, being the worst team in a very strong division is no easy thing to get out of. However, it could get a whole heck of a lot easier if you hit on a rookie quarterback in the first round of the draft.
Yeah, I think the 3 untouchable guys, for me, I mean, the deadline has already passed, but to me, they would have been Wilkins, Crosby, and Bowers, and everybody else is on the table. That's how I would have dealt with the situation. But, maybe Colton Miller as well. But it's interesting stuff. A lot to talk about.
Now, if you're the Raiders, and let's assume that they're looking for a new coach at the end of this season. What are you looking for?
Mike Vrabel.
That's who you're looking for?
I think Mike Vrabel is listen, I think Belichick is going to be a story, especially with the influence of Tom Brady there. There could be Ruben Gutierrez was talking about Kumbaya earlier in the show. There could be a Kumbaya moment here with Belichick and Brady again. And listen, if the past is any, if the past points to what could happen in the future, Mark Davis likes handing the keys to the castle off. He did it with John Gruden. He did it with Josh McDaniels. He's still paying Josh McDaniels, So
he's still paying Gruden.
He's still paying Gruden too. So he likes identifying a coach who's a culture creator. The problem is McDaniels really wasn't that guy, and Gruden, ran into some trouble. And I don't know if I'm a big Gruden guy. I don't know if the proof's in the pudding with him either, with that kind of stuff as a head coach. But what I would say is Belichick would be a guy that would expect the keys to the castle, and Mark Davis might go for that. I think a Vrabel would really be I'm a big Belichick guy, and I think he should get another head coaching job. I do think for what the Raiders could use now, just so they're not doing the same thing as they always do, maybe a Vrabel would be a great selection because it's a guy who's kind of Pierce-ish, because he's got the swagger, he's the former player, he's got some of that player's coach qualities.
Right. Okay,
but he's a guy who garners respect. He's a guy that knows X's and O's. He could handle his side of the ball. He's done a good job demonstrating that he knows how to be the head coach of a football team. So he might be a good guy I think this city would eat him up.
Kick the tires on Mike Vrabel if you're Mark Davis, you're saying.
I would like that. I mean, I've been a major proponent for him in Philadelphia as well. I think Belichick and Vrabel would do tremendous in Philadelphia, but I have a feeling, an inkling that you would be more of the thought, let's get a Ben Johnson, let's get a Bobby
exactly
Slowick.
Where I was trying to go.
And I know you, because you want a guy, it's an offensive-driven league. Let's get a guy who's a play caller who can work head-to-head with our new quarterback that we're bringing in and give him somebody who can really help him.
Yeah, and I know that you love Belichick, and he was great. He was great, right? And he's the greatest coach of all time. But the man's 72.
I like him even more now after I get to hear him talk every day and see what he says on his show.
He's not going anywhere.
He just, I don't know.
He's dating a 22-year-old. He's doing TV. He doesn't want to coach anymore.
You don't think his?
I mean, he probably has
his
the
mermaid girlfriend doesn't want to come to Vegas and get all the benefits.
She
of
would.
Vegas?
She would love Vegas. Listen. If you're the Raiders, scratch out Bill Belichick's name from that list. Now, Mike Vrabel, I think that's a name.
But
however,
you want kind
I don't
of
want
like
a defensive guy.
Right. You want the Shanahan, the McVay.
I want a young up and coming offensive mind, nerdy looking dude. I want a guy that looks like Mike McDaniel. That's who I want. I want somebody who's a genius, who's never played down a football before, but somehow somebody that's wearing the Mike Davis glasses.
Minus the genius.
That's never played it down a football, but somehow can, has learned under, one of these guys, a Shanahan, a McVay, or whoever, that can come in and, regardless of your pieces offensively, can make the offense work. Because I think Sean McVay this year, specifically with the Rams, is a great.
He's such a good coach.
He's such a good coach.
With
I think
all
he's
the
such a good thing to point to.
injuries,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, people don't appreciate the Rams as much as they should.
They hadn't had a first-round pick in how many years? Look at the roster. There are no names all over, and yet they're competing. I think now they're 4-5 or something like that. They're almost back to 500.
But they're tied for first in that division, I believe. Yeah. So with the big win with Stafford, but I mean, what they're doing, losing a Hall of Famer in Aaron Donald, then bringing in the draft picks that they hit on from Kobe Turner to Jared Verse looks tremendous. Brandon Fisk.
Fisk from Florida State.
All these guys that they draft. I mean, the draft, they're constantly hitting on guys. It's very similar to the Detroit Lions. I mean, what we're talking about here is two different things. The Detroit Lions have the Dan Campbell, who's the he's more of the Vrabel.
He's the anti-McVay. Yeah.
But it works in both ways.
Right.
Because you got a GM, Brad Holmes, is hitting on every pick. Every guy that they draft is a contributor and one of the top tier players in their position. Penei Sewell, best right tackle. Brian Branch, incredible. Amon-Ra St. Brown, incredible. Jack Campbell, great. Jahmyr Gibbs, stud. I mean, every single person they're picking is tremendous, right? So they're hitting on the GM front. The same thing is happening in LA. But then Dan Campbell is a culture guy. He's a guy who garners respect, creates a culture, team loves playing for him, and they're able to overcome injuries to an Aiden Hutchinson. I think that's a major telltale sign. We see that in the NFL. When a team is able to move on when a critical injury happens, Aiden Hutchinson was the Defensive Player of the Year candidate, right? He goes down. Yes, they acquired Zadarius Smith, and they're going to try to fill that hole, but they kept moving, right? Same thing even in LA. I mean, losing Kupp and Puka for all those weeks could have set them back, to a tremendously awful record.
They started trading pieces. They got rid of Tre'Davious White. He's a Raven now, and there was rumors that Cooper Kupp might get traded, and all of a sudden, they went from selling to wait a second. Now they're probably a playoff team.
Yeah, and
given how bad the Niners.
And you have to give credit to Dan Campbell, not just for the way he coaches the team, but the way he runs the organization. Because when they lose last year, a guy like Ben Johnson is fending off coaching jobs because he could have become a head coach. But instead, he opted to stay there with this unfinished business notion. So you have to give credit.
It's a testament to the culture.
It really is. And that's hard to listen. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time.
And we've lost the plot here as far as what we were talking about this block. But I think the Lions did it. I think the Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell pairing did it a much different way than, Sean McVay's Rams, it was a lot of, we're trading away first-round picks, we're bringing in pieces to win right now, where the Lions kind of did it organically. You know what I mean? It was all, we're going to acquire picks, and we are going to groom all of our homegrown drafted guys, and this is going to be the result.
But after going all in, they continue to sprout it organically, which is a very
and I think that's what's so
thing.
Impressive. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So very interesting stuff. Listen, we sometimes lose the plot here on SOS, but That's what makes it fun. James, as we end the show, I want to say thank you for tuning in. It's lovely having great callers like Ruben Gutierrez, so shout out to Ruben. But James, as we finish today's show, let's end on a response that we haven't gotten to. We'll see everybody next week. James, let's hear this final response.
Jeff Williams on Facebook, he says, Raiders coach needs to go and the owner.